So the point of this tool is to help us save hours worth of time when building IKFK systems. So the way this will work is we'll just go ahead and select the root joint, run the script, and boom, we'll be able to now blend between IKFK, and we'll make sure that the channel that we'll use to blend will be connected to some node that we will create in the script. And the beautiful thing about this is if we have multiple joint chains, we can go ahead and select each root of each chain, run the script, and again, Maya will generate IKFK rigs and connect each of their blending attributes to that same control. That way we can collectively manage our IKFK blending from one node instead of several, but if you'd like, you can very easily split this out into several by creating more control nodes and then just using the connection editor to connect the channels from the main control panel to those extra nodes, right? But I like the idea of collectively storing them on one node because it's easier to manage in the graph editor. You could just go ahead and find all of your channels in one spot instead of several spots. That's just a preference of mine. But let's say we go ahead and get started, and we'll have a look at how this will be implemented in the script. Sweet. So to get started, we'll first go ahead and create a joint chain. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump to the rigging module. We'll go to the skeleton menu, and we'll use the default settings for the joint tool XYZ. We'll then go ahead and hold down the X key, click, and then click to create a chain. Now when using this IKFK tool, you can choose whatever orientation you'd like. But in this case I'm using XYZ because again it's pretty standard to use an orientation like that when setting up joints in Maya. Now I'm going to go ahead and press Alt B to change the background color so we can see this joint, and something else that helps is if we go ahead and grab the root joint and then our end joint, which is joint 2. So if we go ahead and grab both of those, we could go to the radius channel and just bring up the size by middle clicking and dragging. Another way to do that is to just go to display, animation, joint size, and now you could use this if you'd like to collectively adjust the radius of each joint. Alright, sweet. So yes, we have our joint chain and X is flowing down the chain. One quick way to tell is if you select the joint and you look in the center, you'll notice that the X-axis is flowing down towards the end joint. So it's flowing down the chain. Great. Another way to see this is if you go ahead and grab your two joints and go up to display, transform display, you can enable the local rotation handles, and that'll be a little bit easier to see the orientation laid out. Now with that being said, sometimes when you're creating joints, the end joint is not going to be oriented to match the parent. If I go ahead and grab my joint tool and I quickly create another joint here, you'll see that the end joint is going to be matched to world space, but the root joint is going to have X flow down the chain according to our joint settings. So that being said, what I like to do is just go ahead and grab this end joint and press Ctrl A to jump to the attribute editor, or you can go ahead and click on the tab here over to the right. But then we could go ahead and zero out the joint orient channels so that this end joint matches the parent. It's not necessary again, but it's useful just to make sure that when we are creating this chain, we keep the orientation consistent throughout. So it's just a matter of cleanliness, which is always great for rigging. Things are less prone to break if things are clean. Alright, sweet. So getting back to this, what we're now going to do is use another tool that I created and I have a tutorial for. It's just a way to quickly segment our joint chains. So I'm just going to go ahead and use that now. I'll go to this Python tab that I have here, and here's the tool. So I'll share a link after this tutorial. But what this does is it allows me to choose however many bone objects I'd like to add. So in this case it's going to add 5 bone objects, but 6 joints in total. And a bone object is simply 2 joints parented together to form a chain. So that's considered one bone object. Sweet. So if I were to go ahead and run this with a count of 5, I'll just go ahead and grab the root joint where I want the system to start, and then go ahead and press Control A to highlight the entire script, and then hit enter on the number pad to run it. And there you go. Now we have a total of 5 bone objects evenly spaced. So if we were to count this out, so there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, 4, and then 5. Sweet, so this is working out great. And I just want to segment this just so we can make this a little bit more exciting. Alright, sweet. So, now that we've got this going, we can go ahead and basically get started with our IKFK switch. Now, a word on naming conventions. If we consider a solid naming convention, that can help us save quite a bit of time. So what that means is instead of using this generic name of joint, joint 3, and so on and so forth, let's go ahead and stay organized. So a quick way to rename this hierarchy is to do this. We'll select all of our joints from joint 1 to the end joint, and we could use our rename field on the status bar. Now if you don't see that section, it's right next to the rendering section, so I'll go ahead and just collapse that. And you might see something that looks like this, these transform fields. So just left click on the button next to the transform fields, and now you can go ahead and switch this to rename. Awesome. So watch this. If we were to go ahead and now change the name of all of these, we'll just go ahead and replace what we have here with JNT underscore, let's go ahead and call this tail. And then I'll add one more underscore to separate this name from the numbering that Maya will use to rename the rest of the objects in our selection. So now if we go ahead and run this, take a look. Now we have a much better naming convention. Now to match the digit naming convention that Maya has carried out for most of the chain, I'm just going to go to the top joint and add a 0. So this is the first and then all the way to the last. Alright, perfect. So once we've managed to do that, here's one more thing I'd like to show you, and that's how to add a suffix to this naming convention so that we can very easily search for these joints later on. So watch, if we go ahead and select all of these, we can now go ahead and jump into a new Python tab, and if you'd like, just go ahead and right click inside of the script editor and choose new tab, and then choose whatever language you'd like. So in this case we're going to use Python. So I have a new tab here, and I'm going to get started by first importing in the Maya command module so we can start to use Maya commands with Python. So it's going to be import maya.cmds as MC. Now MC is just a variable that points to Maya commands. I used to like to joke that MC could be cool like that, so now whenever using Maya commands, it's going to be cool dot and then the Maya command. But this doesn't make too much sense. MC does because it's a short form for Maya commands. So we'll go ahead and stick with MC. Now let's move down to a few lines by hitting enter on the keyboard. And at this point we're going to create a variable that will allow us to find our selected joints. So again, this variable can basically be whatever name you'd like. It's recommended not to use the name of a command, but again, this could be cool if we wanted it to be, or awesome, but in this case I'm just going to go ahead and name it cell since this is our selection that we're storing inside of this variable. So that's going to be cell equals mc.ls, and ls is the command that we would use to basically list everything in our session of Maya. Now to actually run this command, we're going to need to add an open and close parentheses. This basically tells Maya to just go ahead and run this as is with no conditions, but if we have any arguments we can add them inside of our parentheses. So let's go ahead and see what this will return. The first thing I'm going to do is run line 1, so I'll highlight it and hit enter on the number pad. So now we've imported in our Maya command module, so now we can start to use MC. So I have all of these joints selected. We can now go ahead and highlight this and hit enter on the number pad, and boom, Maya has now listed everything in our active session, so that's great. If you'd like more information on the command, you could always highlight it, right click and choose quick help, which will give you a little cheat sheet over to the right, and notice it's in alphabetical order. So in this case we're looking for the argument that we would use to find our selection, so we'll go ahead and find the S section, and there it is, SL for selection. So to find the selection, we can go ahead and type SL equals true. If this was Mel, that would be dash SL, as we see here. All right, perfect. Now, something else I want to point out is, yes, we have the quick help, but if you right-click on the command again, you can choose command documentation for a more elaborate breakdown. All right, so let's go ahead and see what Maya will return with our new variable. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go ahead and run the mc.ls command all the way down to the end parentheses. Now when we go ahead and run this, take a look. Maya will now return everything in our selection. Sweet. Awesome. So what we now want to do is basically say, hey Maya, for each of these in our selection, go ahead and rename them with a suffix that we choose. That way, again, when we're done with this, it's very easy to find these joints by searching for their suffix, which we'll have a look at soon. So we'll now go ahead and create a for loop to iterate through each of these, and one at a time, Maya is going to run whatever procedure we provide inside of the for loop. So for each, so this is the variable that will point to our selection, and again, this can be whatever we like. Let's say awesome, right? But that doesn't make sense. Let's go ahead and type something that does, each. So for each in our selection, for each item in our selection, so for each in cell, and then we'll add a colon. Now, when we hit enter on our keyboard, Maya is going to not only shift this down to the next line, but it's going to add an automatic indent, which is necessary for Python, so it knows what to do inside of the for loop. And then once we're finished with the for loop, we'll press Shift Tab to go back to our first line. So after the for loop has done its job, if we'd like to get back to the rest of the code, we could just press Shift Tab to move back to our first space. But since I've now removed that indent, I'll just hit the Tab key to add it back. But again, these indents are super important, and if we don't have them when we need them, the script will not work. All right, but it's nice that Maya will do that automatically for us. So for each of these in our selection, first thing I like to do is go ahead and return what's stored in each, just to show you that it points to cell. So I'm going to go ahead and type the print function, and print is nice whenever you need to kind of check what's happening in your code. So print, and then each. That's it. Now I'm going to come back up here to Maya's history here in the script editor. I'm going to right click and choose clear history, so we're working with a clean slate. So now watch. With all of these still selected, if we go ahead and press Control A and then run this on the number pad, right? Just hitting enter on the number pad. Boom. Now Maya is going to return our selected objects, but it's going to stack them because Maya has now iterated through each of them and return whatever was stored here in each. So super convenient. All right, so now if we would like to add a suffix, it's very simple. We could always use the replace function, and we'll use that later when we create our IKFK tool, but in this case, we could just keep it pretty simple. That's going to be mc.rename, open and close parentheses, and inside we'll say, hey, what's the keyword item you'd like to rename? So this is the item that's going to be affected by the constraint, or in this case, the rename command, not the constraint. There's no constraint here. Have constraints on the mind. So this is the item that's going to be affected by the command here, right? So this is what we want to rename. Now, what do we want to rename it to? Well, that's going to be comma space to separate this from the name that we will rename it to, which is going to be the same name, so each, right? But then we're going to add to it, so we'll use the add operator for that. And now let's go ahead and add two single quotes, because inside we can now specify the name we would like to use as our suffix. So it's going to be underscore, and let's just go ahead and name it skin. So what that means is that these joints would be the joints that we would skin our geometry to. But then when we're done with this, we'll basically have two more chains, which will be used to blend between IK and FK. Sweet. And instead of using constraints, we're actually going to use another node to have that happen. Something that's a little bit lighter than a constraint, and that will work out very well. Okay, awesome. So watch what happens now when we run this. Again, with each of these joints in our selection, if we go ahead and just run this, you'll notice that now we've added a suffix to our selected items. We basically use the name of the item plus the name that we have chosen here. Sweet. So again, naming conventions can save you a ton of time, and the reason why I love this is because we could do a quick search for all of these items. So here's an example. If I go ahead and create another object, let's say a cube, and I'll just go ahead and scale this up and bring this over to the side and then duplicate it like so. Now, if we go back to our status bar and switch this from rename to select by name, watch, we could go ahead and type in the following. We'll add 2 colons, and this is safe because if you decide to use this with a referenced object, we know that with referencing, Maya will basically add a namespace, which uses a colon. So if you're trying to ignore the namespace and get to the object itself, you could use colon colon to ignore namespaces. So we'll add that, and then we'll add an asterisk underscore skin, right? So Maya is going to end its search on skin. So what that means is if there are constraints connected to these joints, Maya is going to ignore that because it's going to end its search on skin. So if we go ahead and run this, boom, only those items will be selected. Awesome. Later, we will change the name to FK and IK as we build out our chains. So that's going to be super convenient. Great. All right, let's go ahead and move forward. So I'll just go ahead and get rid of these 2 objects. Now that we have this chain renamed, we'll basically use this as our base for the FK-IK switch. Now, let's go ahead and talk through that script. Basically, what we want is a way to quickly duplicate this chain twice and use this as our main, again, chain for controlling our model, for deforming the model, but then those extra chains will be for our IK and FK systems, right? So with that in mind, it'd be nice to make sure that the script will work by simply just grabbing the root joint and then running this. And then by doing so, we can very easily set up all of the joints in this hierarchy to that IKFK system. We'll also make sure that this tool will create a control, and that control will store all of our IKFK switches, which I like because it's very easy to manage animation that way. We basically have one control that we would use to access all of those channels, so we can manage that in the graph editor instead of having several controls which each have an IKFK switch. But if you prefer to have several controls, it's very easy to do that. Just go ahead and create more controls, create custom channels, and we'll learn how to do that shortly. But with those custom channels, you could then go ahead and use the connection editor to connect everything from that main control into those separated controls. So again, after this, if you want, it's very easy to just go ahead and use the connection editor to connect IKFK switches individually on each control node you'd like to use for each system. But again, I like the idea of having that all stored on just one node. So that's the approach we'll take with this script. Now, getting right into this, before we go ahead and start to build the IKFK switch, if you'd like to save your script, you could always just go ahead and press Control A to highlight everything you'd like to save. Or again, simply just highlight what you want to save. So if you had 100 lines and you only wanted to save from line 1 to 5, you could just go ahead and highlight the lines you'd like to save. So I'm just going to press Control A to highlight everything. Then we could just go to File here in the script editor and choose Save Script. And browse to wherever you'd like, and then name this blah 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 .py. Now, whenever you need to access it, go to the same directory, and then at that point, you could go to File Open, bring this in, and Maya is actually going to use the name of the script. It's just going to add it to your tab, which is nice. But do keep in mind that if you decide to edit the script and then save that, Maya is actually going to save over that file. So if you want a new copy, you'll need to right-click and choose New Tab, create the tab you need, whether Mel or Python, whatever you're scripting in, and then you could paste the code inside and then save that as a copy. All right, well, with that being said, let's say we go ahead and jump in and get started on this IKFK tool. The tool itself isn't too lengthy at all, so that's good news. But keep in mind that this is not going to add controls or anything like that. This will at least give you an idea as to how to start that process of adding controls. But this primary function is to basically take this chain and set it up so that we can blend between IK and FK. All right, so let's go ahead and get to it. So yes, we're going to keep this first line to import in our myCommand module, but what do we do next? Well, next, what I'd like to do is go ahead and search out each of our selected root joints. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and type in a variable, and we'll name it JNTS, and we'll have this equal to mc.ls, and then inside SL equals true, right, to find our selection. And then we're going to make sure that this will only work on joints. So how do we do that? Well, we could use the type flag, so that's going to be comma space, and then we'll type in type equals, then inside of our single quotes, we'll type in joint. Now, how do I know what type to use here? Well, watch this. We could use the object type command. So that's mc.object, and then capital T for type. And then we'll add our open and close parentheses, and inside we'll go ahead and add two single quotes. Now, we can go ahead and choose any one of these joints. I'll just go ahead and use the selected joint. I'll copy that and paste. And I could always create a variable, but that's not necessary here. I just want to show you what the object type command does. So I'm now just going to go ahead and run this, and watch. Maya will return what type of node this is, and it's a joint. Sweet. So by adding it here, Maya's going to ignore everything else and just apply this to our selected joints. So that's super convenient. All right, so after we've done this, the next thing we're going to do is basically create a for loop. And the for loop is going to say, all right, so for each of our root joints, go ahead and do the following. And just so that this tutorial isn't too lengthy, just want to point out that after we're done here, you could always build on top of this if you'd like. But we'll just go ahead and get started with the for loop. So that's going to be for JNT. So this is the singular form of this, which stores everything in our selection. Remember, we're iterating through each of those objects one at a time and applying the script. So for JNT in JNTS, right? So here's JNTS here that looks for our root joints, and then now we're going to iterate through each of those. We'll then go ahead and add a colon after that, and now we're ready to start adding information inside of the for loop. So we'll go ahead and hit enter on the keyboard to again shift this down to the next line, and Maya will add the indent for us. So now, just to make sure that we are selecting these root joints, we're going to go ahead and add mc.select, open and close parentheses, and inside we'll go ahead and type JNT, again, which is the variable that points to our joints here. And then we're going to use the flag r equals true to replace our selection. So anything we have selected, Maya is going to replace that selection with what we have here, which is just our root joints, and it's just a way to be safe and say, hey, I just want this to work on my selected roots. All right, awesome. So the next thing we will do after that is create a variable for that selection, and we'll name that root JNT. So I just hit enter on the keyboard to move this down to the next line, and we'll have this equal to mc.ls, and then we'll add our open and close parentheses, and inside we'll type sl equals true because we're looking for our selection, right? The selection here. Now, again, we're going to make sure that this is only going to work on our joints. We could use the type flag, type equals joint. And again, this is just a way of being safe. I mean, we have that here, so we don't necessarily need to have that here, but you know, just as a reminder, it's nice to have this type flag just to make sure that we're working on the nodes we'd like to apply the script to. But here's what we're going to add to this. We're going to add a bracket 0. Now the reason why is because, remember, ls is an array, meaning it can be comprised of a lot more than just one node, right? It can be whatever we have in our selection, right? So since it can be comprised of multiple nodes, what we could do is go ahead and assist my and say, hey, just have this variable point to one node instead of several. So watch this. If I go ahead and move to the next line and type print root jnt, now if we go ahead and run this, if I press Control A and run this, Maya is going to return that one node, right? So again, the bracket 0, it just lets us know that, hey, we just want to consider that one root node. Because later on, we're going to be working through several joints, so we need a way to always get back to our root node so that we can build our other systems from it. And just on this topic of the bracket 0 here, just to kind of add a little bit more to this, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to line 3 and shift this down. So remember, JNTS looks at everything we have in our selection, right? So I'm going to go ahead and select multiple joints, and I'm now going to print JNTS like that. So now if I go ahead and run line 3 and 4, Maya is going to, again, give us everything in our selection. But what if we wanted just the first selected joint? Watch. We can go ahead and add our bracket 0 here at the end of JNTS. And now when we run this again, you'll see that we only get the first item in our selection. Sweet. So we're just adding that here. Awesome. So I'm now going to clear out that print line. Just wanted to explain that a little bit more thoroughly. But let's go ahead and continue now. And the next step is to basically go ahead and create that control node. And that control node is going to, again, hold our IKFK blending attributes. So what I'd like to do is say, hey, I'm going to search for the name of this node. So if it exists, then hey, no need to recreate it. But if it doesn't exist, then the script will go ahead and create the node. So we can do that very easily. We're going to start typing in a condition statement, so that's going to be if. And then to search to see if it exists, we could type mc.obj and then capital E for exists, plural. We'll add an open and close parentheses, and inside we'll provide a name that Maya should search for. So I'll just go ahead and add two single quotes, and inside we'll go ahead and type in control. So that's the name we will give this node that will house all of our IKFK switches. All right, sweet. So this is the name it's looking for. So now we could go ahead and say, hey, if this condition is not met, then go ahead and create the node. But if it is met, then go ahead and continue. Right? So that's if mc.object exists, control. Now to tell Maya that, hey, if it doesn't exist, go ahead and do something, we would use an exclamation mark and then an equal operator. So again, the exclamation basically says if this is not true. So now, after the equal operator, we're going to go ahead and type in true and then add a colon. So again, we're basically saying if this condition is not true. Now let's go ahead and hit enter on our keyboard. And again, we're going to shift this down to the next line and add the automatic indent. Now inside of this, we're going to create the node. So that's going to be mc.space locator. Right? So this is going to create a locator for us. Later, if you want, you can make this a curve or anything you'd like, but I'm just going to go and use a locator. It's just convenient. So we'll now go ahead and add an open and close parentheses, and inside we're going to give this a name. So that's going to be n equals, we'll add our single quotes, and the name is going to be this, control. So I'm just going to copy that and paste that inside. Awesome. So the next thing we'll do is again hit enter on our keyboard after this line, and we'll now go ahead and type in the else part of this. So I'll just go ahead and press Shift Tab to move back to this first space where we added our if statement. So now we've come outside of this first part of the statement, and we'll now go ahead and type in else. We'll add a colon. Now, let's go ahead and hit enter again to start to add the else part of this condition statement. And we could do something simple like print, and then we'll add two single quotes and type proceed or is working or whatever you'd like. So watch this. Let's go ahead and test this out. We have our root joint selected. Let's go ahead and see what happens when we go ahead and run the script. Ah, you can see Maya has now created that locator. Now watch what happens when we try to run this again. Remember, the locator exists now. So if I go ahead and select this chain again by just grabbing its root, and I go ahead and run this, notice Maya is not going to create a new locator because we've provided that inside of the condition. So this is working, so that's great. Fantastic stuff. Could also work with try and except statements to do something similar, but we're not going to go that far into this, and I don't want to make this a super lengthy tutorial. But I just wanted to point out that, again, we can add so much more to this. All right, great. So this is working. We now have this control locator added to our scene, and again, we're going to use this to add our IK/FK channels to this object. All right, awesome stuff. So just press Control-A to toggle back to the channel box so you can see this. All right, so what do we want to do next? Let's go ahead and store this control object in a variable so it's very easy to access it later. So again, I'm going to come outside of this condition statement. So right after the print proceed, we'll just go ahead and press Shift-Tab to move back to this first line where we've typed if and else. Now, we're going to type LOC, and this is the variable that we will use to search for this control in our code. So LOC equals, and then we'll just go ahead and copy this with the single quotes, and then paste. So now whenever we need to access this control, it's just a matter of using LOC. All right, cool. Now, what's next? Guess what? We're now ready to build out our FK chain. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. Once we're done with that, we'll then build the IK chain. And then we're going to tell Maya, hey, go ahead and link the chains together. So we don't have much to do. Let's go ahead and get to it. So I'm now going to move to the next line, and I'm going to create a comment. So I'm going to add a hashtag. Any social media users will know what this is. But in this case, this is just a comment to ignore this line of the code, and this is a great way to add notes. So I can go ahead and type whatever, and obviously this is not a command or anything, but Maya is going to ignore this because of the hashtag. You could also add multi-line comments by adding two sets of 3 single quotes with Python. So there's 1 and then there's 2, and now everything inside of the set of single quotes will be ignored. So again, it's just a great way to add notes. But we don't need a multi-line comment here. In this case, all we need is 1 line commented out with a hashtag. All right, sweet. So now we're going to go ahead and just name this FK chain. And we'll move down to the next line. So how are we going to build this chain out? Well, this is where we jump back to this variable that points to our root joint. So feel free to copy that now. We're now going to go ahead and scroll to underneath our comment, and we're now going to type mc.select, open and close parentheses, and inside we're going to paste the name of the variable that points to our selected root joint. Then we'll add a comma space, and you guessed it, we're going to add r equals true to make sure that it's only considering this selected root joint. All right, sweet. So what's next? Now let's go ahead and duplicate it. So to do that, we can use mc.duplicate, open and close parentheses, and inside that's going to be rr for return root. So it's just duplicating this joint, and we'll have that equal to true. So now this is going to duplicate the joint object. And if you'd like to test this, watch. We can go ahead and select our root joint and go ahead and run this. And now take a look, we now have a duplicated chain. Cool. So that's working out great. I'll go ahead and press the Z key to undo. So after we've duplicated the chain, now what we need to do is store the duplicated chain in a variable. So we're going to go ahead and name this chain root jnt underscore fk underscore node. And again, we're going to have this equal to our selection. So all we need to do here is just go ahead and copy this line for our root joint variable, basically the command, including the bracket 0, and we'll paste that after our equal operator. So now this variable is going to point to our new selection. Because remember, once we duplicate this chain, if I go ahead and run this again, watch. If I have this joint selected and I run this, you'll notice that, yes, the duplicated chain, or its root, is now selected. So now we're taking that selection and we're storing it here. So if you'd like, you can go ahead and print line 15. So I'll just go ahead and print, and then I'll copy the name of the variable. So there are no syntax errors, there are no misspellings. We'll go ahead and paste like that. Alright, sweet. So now if I were to go ahead and undo here in my scene, just remove that copy, and then if we go ahead and run this, take a look, mine's going to print out the new root. Awesome. But this naming convention is kind of messy, so this is where we get to use the replace function to get this renamed to something that makes a little bit more sense. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and undo. And now we'll go ahead and move to the next line, and we will type a variable that will point to the new name for the fk root. So feel free to just go ahead and copy this. So root jnt fk minus the node, because remember, this root fk node points to the older name. So that's root jnt fk, and we'll have this equal to, and now it's time to rename this. So it's going to be mc.rename, and then we'll add our open and close parentheses. Alright, sweet. So now that we've used the rename command, let's go ahead and learn how to use the replace function to very quickly rename this node. So we first need to provide what we're trying to rename. So obviously it's this. This is the root joint. Again, with the bracket 0, it's just pointing to this one root. Right? So we're just going to go and copy its old name, which is stored here. So that's everything from root to jnt all the way down to node. Let's copy that, and we'll paste that inside of our parentheses for the rename command. And then we'll add dot replace, and then we'll add an open and close parentheses, and inside we're going to provide the name of the node, so the original name, which is the name of this, with the digit 1, right? Because remember, when we duplicate this object, if I go ahead and take this and duplicate it, take a look, here's the naming convention. Mine has added a 1 so that there's no naming conflicts. So with that in mind, we just need to search for this, the name of our selection with the digit 1, and replace that with fk. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove that, and we're going to jump back to our rename line. And after our parentheses, after replace, inside of the parentheses, we're going to add 2 single quotes to tell Maya what we're trying to search for. So that's skin 1. And then, after our last single quote, we'll add a comma space to separate this from what we'd like to rename this to. So again, we're going to add 2 single quotes, and inside we're going to type fk. Alright, so let's go ahead and see what this does. With our root joint selected, if we were to go ahead and run this, take a look, we've now replaced the name skin with fk. So we're off to a great start. Now it hasn't renamed the entire hierarchy. We're going to do that another way, but note that we can at least use this to start to organize this chain. Now something I don't quite like is the radius. The radius is right on top of our original chain. So let's go ahead and create a variable that we could use to search out the radius of this new chain, which is about 10 point whatever, and then we're going to use simple math to increase the size just slightly. So we're going to move down to the next line, and we'll now type in the following. We're going to basically create that variable. So we could always name it root underscore fk underscore rad for radius. and we'll have this equal to, and we'll use the getAttr command because we're trying to get an attribute value. So that's how we do this inside of Maya. That's going to be mc.get, and then capital A for attr. So there's our camel casing. And then we'll go ahead and add an open and close parentheses. And inside, here's where we tell Maya, hey, I'd like to go ahead and grab the radius of this node. So we're using root jntfk, not root jntfk node, because we've changed the name in this variable here, right? So we're now going to take this variable and copy that and paste that inside of the getAttr command's parentheses. Now, to add to this the exact name of the radius, we do what we did before. We're going to add an add operator, and then we're going to add two single quotes, and inside we're going to add dot radius. This is the same thing as doing this. Watch, if I go to the radius channel here, and I go ahead and change its value to, let's say, 20. Notice what Maya prints out in its history. There's the name of the joint, dot radius. So this is the path to that attribute, dot radius. So we're just adding that here. Here's the name of our FK chain, which can be whatever, right? Because that's the whole point of scripting this, so we can provide this to any chain that we'd like to create an IKFK system for. So there's the variable. And then to add to this, we need the exact name of the channel, which is radius. So now we have that stored. So if you like to test this, we could always print this out. So that's going to be print. And then we could just go ahead and copy this, which is what stores that value. And now, if we were to just go in and remove the FK chain so it doesn't create a new one, I'll just go ahead and now select the root joint, and we'll go ahead and run this and take a look. Maya will print out the value of our radius. Sweet. So this print function is really nice. All right, so now that we know that that's working, let's go ahead and move forward. So what are we going to do next? Well, now it's time to select the entire hierarchy. So we're going to grab the entire hierarchy of our FK chain, and we're going to use that to basically increase the size of each joint. So I'm just going to go ahead and move down to the next line, and we will type in the following. So we're going to say mc.select, open and close parentheses. And inside of this, we will now go in and select the hierarchy of our FK chain. So all we have to do is just go ahead and copy the variable that points to our root joint, paste that inside of our select command, and then to grab the hierarchy, it's just going to be comma space hi equals true. And remember, this stands for hierarchy. And if you have any questions, just highlight the command, right click, and choose quick help. So there it is, hierarchy. Awesome. So once we managed to do that, well, now we could store this in a variable. So it's going to move to the next line, and we'll type JNTS, since we have multiple joints here, underscore FK. So this is the entire FK chain. And we'll have this equal to our selection. So remember, we've already typed that, so we'll just go ahead and copy this minus the bracket 0 because we're trying to get to each joint in our chain now, not just the first joint. So we're just going to go and copy this line, any one of these lines that has the ls command with the type joint, just to save time. And we'll go ahead and paste. Awesome. So now our FK chain is going to be stored in this variable. All right, cool. Now to adjust the radius, we need a for loop. So Maya will iterate through each of these one joint at a time and change the radius. So it's time to create the for loop now. We'll just name this for each underscore FK. So for each FK in what? In JNTS FK. So let's go ahead and copy that and then paste. All right, so now, yeah, we guessed it. We add the colon and then we hit enter on the keyboard to shift this down to the next line. So now it's time to basically grab the radius of that entire chain, right? So we've already done that. We've done that here, so we could basically use that here in the script. But if you wanted to, you could always do something like this. So let's say if we were to clear this out, you can add that right here inside of the for loop. So rad equals, and then we could go ahead and point to each joint's radius. And the reason why this is nice is because if your radius changes through each joint, Maya is basically going to consider the radius of each joint in the for loop. Whereas what we had up here, if I go ahead and undo back, this is only pointing to the radius of our root joint. So it really depends. If you want, you can say, hey, just go ahead and use the radius of one joint. But if you want the radius of all the joints in the hierarchy, you can go ahead and add that to the for loop. So your preference, but I wanted to show you two options. All right, sweet. So let's say we take the approach of looking at the radius of each joint. And if that's the case, then feel free to either comment this line. So line 18, we can go ahead and add a hashtag here so this line gets ignored, or you could just clear this out completely. All right, but getting back to this, we can now go ahead and, again, create a variable here, and we'll name that rad equals. And again, it's going to be the same thing we have here. So feel free to just go ahead and copy this, the getAttr line, and we'll go ahead and paste. So rad equals mc.getAttr, but instead of looking at just the root joint, this time we're going to look at each joint. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab each fk, and then we'll go ahead and paste that here. All right, sweet. Now, to show you that this is going to work on each joint here, I'm going to go ahead and change the radius of just a few of these. And then we're going to print that out. So I'm just going to go ahead and move down to the next line, which in this case is 23. And I'll go ahead and type print rad, like that. So now I'm going to take this fk chain and delete that. And then we're just going to go ahead and change the radius of a few of these, maybe the ones at the very end, like that. All right, cool. So now if I go ahead and take this root joint and I go ahead and run the script, see that? So you can see that some of these will have the 10.8 radius, but then the others will have a smaller radius. All right, awesome. So this is working out very well. Now, instead of printing this, we want to basically use the current radius, but then we want to add to it, right? So let's go ahead and do that to finish out this section. So all we need to do is use the setAttr command. So that's going to be mc.setAttr, and then we'll add an open and close parentheses. Now inside of this command, we need to provide the channel that we're trying to set. So we know that that is each fk. So let's go ahead and copy the for loop variable here, paste that inside, and then we'll add to this, right? We're going to need to get to the radius channel, which is here. So that's plus, we'll add our single quotes, dot radius, like that. It's the same thing that we've typed here, so feel free to copy this if you like. But this is what we're trying to set. Now, what are we trying to set it to? Well, let's go ahead and add a comma space to now provide the value. So here's the keyword item again that we're trying to have this command affect. And now we're trying to change the value, and we're going to go ahead and do that by typing in the current radius, and then we're going to go ahead and add to this just a slight offset, let's say 0.5. So it's going to look at the current radius and it's going to add this value. Sweet, so let's go ahead and test this out. If we were to, let's say, go ahead and get rid of this fk chain and grab our root joint again and go ahead and run this as is, take a look. It's working. So it's taken that offset and it's applied it to each joint of about a value of 0.5. And this allows us to select between our chains a little bit faster. Cool. All right, so now that that's working, I might want to make sure that the radius is consistent here, but I just wanted to point out why we would, again, add the radius variable inside of the for loop versus adding it outside of that. And this is actually a little distracting for me. I might just go ahead and clear that out. But note that if you wanted to get back to this, you could always just, leave the comment here and then remove this when you're ready for it. But I like to keep this as clean as possible. And if I'm not going to use the line, then might as well go ahead and remove that. All right, cool, sweet. Well, now that that's working, again, I'm just going to go ahead and take the fk chain and remove that. And now we can go ahead and revert back to a value of 10.8. So now the size is consistent. Sweet. So we have a way of adjusting our FK chain, and we'll do the same thing for the IK chain. So what do we want to do next? Well, now, remember, we have renamed the root joint of our FK chain, but we need a quick way to rename all of our FK joints. And it's going to be more than just using the rename command, because one thing that we might run into is a name clash problem, where even though, and I'll show you this, if I go ahead and duplicate this root joint and I move this over to the side, even though the root joint has a unique name, the other joints don't. So we want a way to quickly just go in and rename the rest of these joints in the hierarchy. So there's actually a very cool way we could do that in Maya that's very quick, and that is using the search replace names tool. So modify search replace names. Now, what we're going to do is learn how to basically create a mel wrapper that will allow us to very quickly use that search replace names tool. And what's beautiful about this is we could actually start to use mel scripts inside of Python just to work a bit more conveniently. So here's how we're going to do this. We're going to go to the very top of our code, not chord, this is in music. We're going to go to the top of our code, and we're going to type in import maya.mel as mel. And this is how we can start to use mel inside of Python. Sweet. So after that, I'll just go and add some space between this module and the rest of our script, like so, just to make sure that this is easy to read. And now that we have this, now we can go ahead and jump back to the FK chain. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to come outside of this for loop because we're done with it. It's done its job. It's changed our radius. So now let's go and hit enter on the keyboard to shift this down one line, and then we'll press shift tab to move back to this first space where we started the for loop. Sweet. Now once we're here, we're going to go ahead and type in the following. That's mel.eval, right? So we're basically using the variable that we have identified here at the very top. So instead of using maya.mel, all right, now we're just going to go ahead and use mel. So mel.eval to evaluate mel. And now we're going to go ahead and add an open and close parentheses. Now inside, this is where we get to use the search replace names tool. So watch this. We'll go inside of our parentheses, and we'll go ahead and add 2 single quotes, because we're going to now provide the exact name for the mel command that will be used to search and replace our name. Now inside of this, we're going to go ahead and type search, and then capital R for replace. And then we're going to go ahead and add a capital N for names, plural. So this is the mel command. Search, replace names, like that. Cool. Now we'll add a space, and we're going to provide the node we're trying to search for in that hierarchy. So again, we're trying to search for the name skin in the FK chain and replace with FK. So we'll now go ahead and add 2 double quotes, because this is necessary with mel. We wouldn't use single quotes with mel, double quotes. So we'll add 2 double quotes, and inside we're going to go ahead and provide the name we're trying to search for, which is skin. And now we'll go ahead and add a space after this set of double quotes. No need for a comma here, because that's for Python, as you can see, but not mel. So after this first set of double quotes and the name skin, we'll now go ahead and add a space, and we'll add another set of double quotes, and inside we're going to type FK. So that's what we're trying to rename our suffix to. The last thing we need to provide is a way to tell Maya to work on the entire hierarchy. So we're just going to go ahead and add a space, and then we'll go ahead and add another set of double quotes, and inside we'll type in the word hierarchy, like this. All right, sweet. So let's go ahead and see what this does. So if I now go and grab this root and I run this, take a look. If we now expand this entire hierarchy, we can just hold down Shift and then click to expand the entire chain. Boom. Now everything has been renamed with FK. All right, so we've got our FK chain. Now, let's go to make sure that all of these joints are stored in a variable so we can grab that chain later. So we're just going to go ahead and hit enter to move down to the next line. And we're going to now type fk underscore chain. So this is the variable we'll use. We'll have this equal to, yep, you guessed it. Let's just go ahead and find that line up here, mc.ls.sl, and then type joint without the brackets, because we now have the entire chain stored here. Lovely. So we now have finished our fk chain. So now it's time for the ik chain. And guess what? We could save a lot of time by just using the same code that we used here from line 13 down to 25. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy all of this, including the empty space that leads up to the very first space. It's going to be easier to paste this. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy all of that all the way down to line 25, copy. And then we'll go to our next line. We'll press Shift Tab to move to our very first space, and then we'll go ahead and paste like that. So now again, we've pasted in a way where we have kept the spacing we need because of the for loop that we've added up here. So we're still inside of our for loop. Awesome. All right, so now we can go ahead and scroll down, and we'll go to this line where we start fk chain, but this needs to be ik, right? So let's go ahead and change this fk to ik. Now, all we need to do is basically search for everything with fk and replace with ik. So I'm going to go ahead and start by highlighting the first fk I see here on line 29. And I'm just going to go ahead and press Control F inside of the script editor. And notice now we can start to use search and replace names. So we're going to search for fk and replace with ik. Now, be careful. I'd recommend not using replace all unless you're completely confident that you know what you're doing. But in this case, we do not want to use replace all because that's going to replace all of our fk names. So we're just going to go one at a time and use replace instead. I don't like that these two buttons are close to each other. But let's go ahead and get to it. So we're going to go ahead and replace that with ik, then ik. We're just going to click and just check our naming. And you can see why we've been using this kind of naming structure, because it allows us to do something like this very quickly, stay organized, right? So just a few more here and we'll be done. Sweet. And when we get to this last one, what I like to do instead of clicking replace again is I'll just go ahead and change the last one, because once we click replace, it's just going to go ahead and jump back to find the next fk. So it makes sense to just go ahead and take that very last one that it finds and just manually go in and change that. All right, cool. Well, we have our ik chain now, so at this point we can test this to make sure it will work. Something else I'd like to do, just to make sure our chains don't overlap, is change this radius value. So let's go to this radius for loop here, and instead of using 0.5, we'll increase this a little bit more than our fk chain's radius by setting this to a value of 1. So it's going to take the current radius and add 1 to it. All right, let's see if this works. So I'm just going to go ahead and take the fk chain and delete that. And now we could go ahead and take our main root. We'll press Control A to highlight the entire script, and then we'll press enter on the number pad and take a look. It's working perfectly. So as you can see, we have an fk chain and an ik chain, as you can see, and everything is renamed the way it should be. Exciting. All right, so this is working out very well, and we saved so much time this way. So guess what? We are basically ready to finish this script. So I'm just going to go ahead and take these two chains and remove them. Cool. So how do we finish this out? Well, now it's time to create our blending channel. So let's go ahead and move to the next line, and we'll now go ahead and add a hashtag so we can add a comment, and let's go ahead and call this fk ik blending, just to stay organized. So you can see we're keeping each section organized using these comments. So fk/ik blending. Nice. Now, the first thing we're going to do is tell Maya, hey, go ahead and start adding a custom channel to our control, which is the locator. All right, so let's go ahead and do that now. In order to add a custom channel, that's going to be mc.add and then capital A for adder. We'll now go ahead and add and open and close parentheses, and inside of this we will basically tell Maya to add this to loc. And remember, loc points to any object that has the name control. But you could always change this later. We just don't have time to do that now because this code would be a little bit lengthier and I don't want to take up too much of your time. So I'm just going to go ahead and use what we've already defined at the top of the code. So loc, right? So this is the keyword item that we're going to have this command effect. And now it's time to add a name, right? So let's go ahead and use the flag ln, which stands for long name, and we'll have this equal to. Now, what's the name we're going to provide this? Well, it makes sense to use the name of our root joint, and then we're going to basically add fkik, right? So the way this works is whatever the root joint is named, if we have several root joints, again, let's work on all of those, but whatever the root joint is named, that's going to be the unique name for our custom channel, and then we're going to add fkik on top of that. All right, cool. So this is really simple to do. We'll simply type root jnt, which is the name of our main chain, right? The root for that chain. And then we're going to add to that, we'll add our single quotes, and inside of this, we'll simply go ahead and add underscore fkik, like so. And whatever name you use here, this is the name you would search for later if you ever need to edit that channel with a script. Sweet. So fkik. And I like to do it this way so that we know that, hey, fk is first and then ik second. So when we're at a value of 0, we're in fk mode. And when this value is set to 1, we're in ik. Cool. Something else I want to point out is when I'm concatenating like this, when I'm basically taking this variable and adding that to a name I specify here, I basically like to wrap this in parentheses. Again, it's not necessary for Python, but it's just a way of staying organized. So now all of this is in one container, if you will. It's grouped together with these parentheses. All right, sweet. So let's go ahead and continue. So next, we're going to basically provide an attribute type. So that's going to be at for attribute type equals, and then we'll add our single quotes, and we'll simply type in double, meaning we want to use a float type or double precision. All right, sweet. Now, outside of these single quotes, we'll add another comma space, and we'll next provide a minimum value. So we're basically providing a threshold, a range. So we'll type in min equals 0, and then our max value is going to be 1. So max equals 1. So again, when we're at 0, we're in FK mode. When we're at 1, we're in IK. All right, now this is going to create the new channel, but you won't see it in the channel box. And let me go ahead and show you what that looks like. So I'll just go ahead and select the root joint, and I'll go ahead and run this. I'll press Control A and then run the script, and boom. If we go to our control node, hey, where's the channel? Well, it is there. Watch this. If we press Control A to jump to our attribute editor, and we go to our transform tab, because that's where we added the custom channel to. So if we go ahead and select this first tab, which is control, if we go to extra attributes, there's the channel. But that doesn't do us any good, right? We want to access it from the channel box. So here's how. We just need to make sure that the channel is keyable. So it's very easy to do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and undo so that we remove the IKFK chains, and we're basically back to where we were before. So now we'll just go to the line underneath this, and we will basically use the set adder command to make sure that this is going to be keyable. All right, so that's going to be mc.set adder, open and close parentheses. Now, we'll go ahead and type in the attribute name. And here's something fun we could do, because this is eventually going to be quite a bit to type, right? So we can actually save a bit of time here. And here's how. I'm just going to go ahead and go between line 40 and 41. So I'll just go and add a space here. And I'm going to create a variable that will point to the name of that attribute. So we're going to go ahead and name that variable fkik, like that. And we'll have this equal to the name loc. So we'll copy this name because this is the object that has the custom channel. So loc, right? And then we'll add an add operator. From there we'll add our single quotes, and we're now going to add an underscore. Now, or excuse me, in this case, not an underscore but a dot. Because remember, when we change the value of something, like if I go to this rotate Y and I change this to a value of 5, here's what Maya prints out. So this is what we're basically doing. We're saying here's the control name dot, and then here's the custom channel name. So let's go and undo to remove that value of 5, and we'll jump back to our script. So again, this variable is going to point to that object dot and then the channel name. So after we add the single quotes and then the dot inside, we'll now go ahead and add to this the name of our channel, which is root_jnt_fk. Like that. So if you want, you could go ahead and print out line 41. So I'll just go ahead and do that so you can see exactly what we're storing in fkik. And the reason why is, again, so we don't have to type all of this. We could just go ahead and use fkik when we're setting the attribute. So I'm just going to go ahead and type print, and then I'll copy this variable and then paste like that. So now here's something cool. If we want to just go ahead and run from this last line here, which is line 42, let's say if I don't want to run line 43 because it's unfinished, and I just want to run from the line above on, I could go ahead and go to the end of line 42, and I can go ahead and hold down Control Shift and hit the Home key on the keyboard, and Maya will select from that line all the way up to the first line, like that. Sweet. So now if I go ahead and hit Enter on the number pad to run this, you'll notice, let me go to make sure we have the joint selected. Notice it didn't do anything because I didn't have a joint selected. So let's go ahead and try this again. Again, I'm just going to go ahead and press Control Shift and then press the Home button. There we go. And now if I go ahead and run this, the script is going to work. And take a look at what we've printed out. Here's the name of our locator, dot, and then here's the name of our channel. Awesome. So this is working out very well. So let's go and get to it. I just hit the Z key to undo back. And now we're ready to set the attribute. So here's how this is going to work. All we need to do is provide the name of our variable instead of all of this. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this and paste that inside of the parentheses like that. All right, so once we've managed to do that, the next step is to basically tell Maya to edit this channel and make it keyable so we can see it in the channel box. So add a comma space, and then it's going to be E for edit equals true, comma space, K for keyable equals true. Now if we were to grab our root joint again and run this, so I'll go ahead and press again Control A since line 43 is good. We could go ahead and highlight everything this time, and then we'll hit Enter on our number pad, and boom. If we go back to our locator, there is our channel. How exciting. Sweet. And we're keeping the unique name here of the channel. That way, when we have multiple chains, they will all have unique names. Exciting. All right, so that's working. I'll press the Z key to undo back. So guess what? We're just about done now. Now that we have that channel, we can now go ahead and start to basically create a way to plug into that channel. So let's go ahead and get to it to finish this up. Just a few more lines and we'll be done. So the next thing we want to do is grab our entire hierarchy of the main chain. The reason why is because later we're going to use that naming convention to say, hey, look at the main chain, and then go ahead and search for the unique names of the IKFK chains, and then use that when connecting the chains for the IKFK blend to work. All right, let's go ahead and get to it. So here, after the set adder command, we're going to grab the hierarchy of our main chain. So that's MC dot select, open and close parentheses, and inside we'll type in root or not underscore, but root and then capital JNT, because again, that is the name of our root joint that we provided up here. Sweet. All right, so that's select root, and now we want to grab the entire hierarchy, so you guessed it, that's going to be comma space, and then hi equals true to grab the hierarchy. All right, now let's say we go ahead and create a variable for this selection, so it's very easy to access the entire chain. So we'll just go to name this main underscore JNTS, and we'll have this equal to our selection. So I'll just go ahead and grab that command from any one of these lines that we've used it on, and then paste, just to make sure I'm using the correct syntax. All right, perfect. So once we have this selection stored, this hierarchy stored in this variable, now we're basically ready to create our final for loop. All right, so let's go ahead and move down to the next line, and we'll type for, and then that's going to be main underscore JNT, right? Because this is the plural form, so we're just going to use the singular form for our for loop because mine's going to iterate through each of these, right? So main JNT in, main JNT S, like so. So again, I'm using the singular form here and then plural here. Nice. All right, so now it's time to add the colon, and then we'll hit enter on the keyboard to move down to the next line. All right, let's go and get to it. Now, the next thing we're going to do is create that blending function that's going to allow us to blend between FK and IK. And we could always use the color blend node. So let's have a look at that really quickly. I'll just go to Windows and grab the node editor. If you'd like to clear out your graph, you could just click on this icon here on the top shelf that looks like a group of stars. We'll just go ahead and clear that out. But careful, if you ever need to clear out selected nodes, just go ahead and use the minus button. But if you don't want to clear everything out, don't use this button. And if you'd like to add to your graph, click on the add button here. All right, so now with this clean slate, if we go ahead and press the tab key to search for nodes, we could go ahead and type in blend, and there it is, blend colors. So here's what's cool about this node. Let's go ahead and have a look at our channel box. You'll notice that we have the blending channel up top. So this is how we get to switch between FK and IK, between 0 and 1, like that. And then the first group here will basically be used for one value, and then the second group, which is color 2, will be used for another value, like that. So really neat stuff. And it's lighter than a constraint, because we know with constraints there are a lot of nodes that get connected into a constraint. They're beautiful for animation, obviously, but for something like this, it's not necessary. We could just go ahead and keep this much lighter and use this blend colors node. So that's what we're going to create. Sweet. All right, so let's go ahead and get to it. Now inside of the for loop, remember we're going to need this for each of our joints so we can connect each of them to the FKIK system. That's why we're adding it to the for loop. So for main joint and main joint, which points to our hierarchy for the main chain, we'll go ahead and create another variable and we'll name it blender. And we'll have this equal to our blend colors node. So to do that, we type mc.create and then capital N for node, like that. And then we'll add an open and close parentheses, and inside, the first thing we need to provide is, again, the keyword, or what we're trying to create. So we're going to go ahead and add our single quotes, and inside, that's going to be the name blend, and then a capital C for colors, plural. So now we've provided Maya with the actual node we'd like to create. So next, we'll add a comma space, and this is where we get to give it a name. I will name you the name of the main joint in the for loop plus FKIK blend. That makes sense. It's a very concise name. So that's going to be N equals. And again, if you'd like, you can go ahead and add a set of parentheses just to group your concatenated name. So inside of the parentheses, we'll go ahead and type main underscore JNT, which is the variable that we're using for our for loop that goes through each of those joints, plus, now we're going to go ahead and now add two single quotes to give this a suffix. So that's going to be underscore fk underscore ik underscore blend. So this will be the suffix for that node, and the prefix will be the name of our joint. Let's go ahead and see what this does. So if I go ahead and grab the root joint, like so, and I go ahead and run this, boom, take a look. Now you can see that Maya has selected the last blend node, and there's the name. It's the name of the joint, underscore fk underscore ik blend. So we're staying organized. Fantastic. So this is nice and clean. All right, so now that we've created this, well, guess what? Now it's basically time to create a set of variables that will basically point to our fk system and ik system. Very easy to do. We can go ahead and use the replace function again. So watch this. It's going to be fk equals, and now we're going to search for main underscore jnt, but remember that name has skin in it. So how do we have this point to our fk chain? Well, simple. That's going to be dot replace. We'll add our open and close parentheses. Now inside of this is where we provide the name that we're trying to search for in this chain, as we've done before, right? So we'll add our single quotes and we'll search for skin, and outside of this last single quote we'll add a comma space, we'll add another set of single quotes, and we'll type in fk. Now this isn't actually going to replace the name, it's going to add this to the variable, but it's not going to actually rename anything because we haven't provided the rename command. Alright, so if we want, we could go ahead and print fk. So watch, let's go ahead and do that now. Print fk, like that. So now, with the root joint selected, if we go ahead and run this, take a look. Maya has now stored the name here that we're using for the fk chain inside of this variable. So that's how we will assign our fk chains. Cool. So I'll go ahead and press the Z key inside of the viewport to undo back, and we can go ahead and clear that out. So I just wanted to show you how that works. So you guessed it, let's go ahead and copy this and use that for ik. I'll just copy that, paste underneath, and that's going to be ik main jnt replace skin with ik, like that. Awesome. Alright, so just a few more lines and we're done. So now what we need to do is go ahead and connect the rotation of our joint into our blend colors node. And then once we're done with that, we'll be able to connect all of this to our IKFK switch. And then that's going to be it. And that's it. So we're on the home stretch, literally. So let's go to the next line, and we're going to use mc.connect, and then capital A for adder, so we can connect attributes, open and close parentheses. Now, inside, here's where we provide what we're trying to connect. So let's go ahead and add another set of another set of parentheses. That way we can kind of group this together, the same way we've grouped a few of these together up here, just to stay organized. It's not necessary, but it's a great way, again, to keep this clean. So inside of this set of parentheses, we will now provide the name of our IK joint, which is IK, plus, and then we'll add to this dot rotate. So this will grab the entire rotate list. Sweet, and we'll be able to take that and add it to our blend color node. Remember, with the blend color node, we had color 1 and color 2, and each of those had an RGB. So we're basically taking that entire rotate list and connecting it into color 1 and color 2. All right, fantastic. So there is ik.rotate. Now, outside of this parentheses, just before our last parentheses, right? So outside of this grouping, we'll add a comma space, and this is where we connect into one of those blend color ports. So that's going to be open and close parentheses, and inside we'll go ahead and type in the variable that we're using for our blend color node, which is blender. And then we will add to this, we'll add our single quotes, and to get to the first color port, that's going to be dot color 1, right? And again, if you need a quick reminder, if we go back to our node editor and we create another blend color node, so I'll just hit the tab key and I'll type in blend color like that. There it is, color 1 RGB, color 2 RGB. So now we're using that. We don't need to provide the RGB because, again, we're connecting into this vector channel, which is basically comprised of 3 attributes, X, Y, and Z, or in this case, RGB. All right, awesome. So I'll just go ahead and clear that out. All right, so now we've told Maya to connect into the first color, which is color 1. Something else I like to do, so outside of this grouping, we'll add another comma space, and F equals true to force the connection. This allows us to override connections. Not to say that we need it here, but it's always nice to have if you ever need to force a connection. So F equals true. All right, sweet. Well, that's it for this line. So watch, we could just go ahead and copy all of this. Go to the next line, paste, and now we are going to change color 1 to 2, and instead of IK, we'll have this set to FK, and that's it. So now we've connected into our blend color node, and we've connected the rotation of IK and FK. So remember, if you recall from the blend color node, at the very top we have the ability to blend between either color 1 or color 2. Fantastic, and that is going to be controlled by our IK-FK channel on the locator. So let's go ahead and add that. And before we do, we just need to obviously make sure we take the output of our blend color node and plug that into our main joints, right? Because if we don't do that, then no matter how we blend with the blend attribute, we're not going to see anything because we haven't told Maya to take the output of the blend color node that points to the rotation of this and connect it into our main joint. So let's do that now. And then the last step is to connect that blend channel into our custom IKFK channel, and that's it. So just 2 more lines. So again, we're going to use the connect adder command, so feel free to copy and then paste. But now this time, we're going to take the blend color node, which is blender dot whatever. I'll just go ahead and copy that, and we'll add that first, like that. Now we need to get to its output, right? So instead of color 2, I'll just change that to output, which is basically the result of these connections here, IK rotate, FK rotate. So now we're taking the output of that node, and we will connect into what? Into the rotation of our main joints, right? So instead of blender here, we're going to go ahead and change this to main underscore JNT, which points to our main chain. And then instead of dot color 2, this is going to be dot rotate. Simple, right? Because we use dot rotate here to plug into this node. Now the output is going to be plugged in to here, the rotate channels of the original chain. All right, awesome. Now let's go ahead and add our last line, which connects our blend channel to our custom IKFK channel. So feel free to paste the connect adder command or type it, whatever is faster. We won't be too lazy here, so that's going to be mc.connect adder open and close parentheses. Now inside of this, again, how do we get to our FKIK channel? Well, remember we created this very convenient attribute here, FKIK. So I'll just go and copy this name. We'll scroll down and paste like that. So remember, this points to the name of the object dot the name of that channel. So you can see how much time that saves. All right, so now that we have that variable, we'll add a comma space, and now we'll tell Maya that we're trying to plug in to the blend color node dot blend, right? Because again, if we look at that node one more time, so I hit the tab key, I'll type in blend to find blend colors, we'll left click to grab it, and there's the channel name. And just to show you, if I go ahead and change the value to 0, here is the path to that attribute. Awesome. So let's go ahead and provide that in our script to finish up. So it's going to be connect adder FKIK, and inside of this we will now type the name of our variable that points to the node, which is blender, paste, and then we'll add to this using the add operator, and then we'll add single quotes, and that's going to be dot, and you guessed it, blender, because that's the path to the actual attribute. And then again, we could force a connection, so we can go ahead and type comma space f equals true. And again, if you'd like, you can group this together like we've done up here. So we can add an open parentheses before blender and then a close parentheses after our last single quote. And that is it. So let's go ahead and test this out. So if I go ahead and grab this chain and I go ahead and run this, take a look at what we've done. Here's our blend color channel. And now watch. Right now, according to our value, we are in FK mode. So let's go ahead and see what happens. If I go ahead and grab the FK chain, which is the one between the two chains, if I start to pull at this, we should see our main chain moving with it, and that's exactly what happens. So here's the main chain. And you can see if I go ahead and select any one of these joints, the rotation is being driven. So perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and take the FK chain and just go ahead and add some rotation to it, like that. And then I'll take the IK chain and I'll go ahead and grab these joints and add some rotation here. Alright, so now watch. When we grab the locator, we can now blend by using our custom channel. So now we're blending between the two states. Awesome. Sweet. So again, I just wanted to show you a cool way we can create an IKFK blending tool to save a bunch of time. So if I were to go ahead and undo back to remove the system, if I now go ahead and take this joint and duplicate it and kind of move this over like so, I can go ahead and change the name of these joints, right? So a quick way to do that is this. I might go ahead and take this tail node and maybe change this to something like rope, right? So I'll just go ahead and grab the root joint and I'll go to modify, search and replace names. We'll search for tail and we will replace with rope. Sweet. And remember, this is set to hierarchy. We basically use this in our script. Remember when we used that mel wrapper inside of Python? So we're just using that here, and I'll go ahead and click replace. And then I'll go ahead and get rid of the one at the end of the name just to kind of keep this clean. So if I expand this entire hierarchy, now we have unique names for this. Let's watch. Here we have this joint chain for the rope rig. Here we have this joint chain for our tail rig. So according to our script, if we were to go ahead and scroll up, we could basically use this on any root joint we have selected. So if I go ahead and grab the two roots and I run this, let's see what happens. Boom, it's working perfectly. So now you can see we have our IKFK chains, there are main chains, and if we go ahead and grab our locator, here we have two unique IKFK blending attributes. So this will work out very well. And just to show you, I'll go ahead and take this chain for the FK system, and I'll go back to the control panel here, and I'll start to use this to blend between the two. Oh, and I'll need to make sure I'm using the correct channel. I was using the tail channel. There it is. Boom. So now we're blending between our IKFK system for this chain and that chain as well. Sweet. Well, hope you find this useful. And again, this is just a way to kind of get you thinking about how you can create a tool to save you a ton of time. And that way we can focus on, you know, our performance instead of the technical kind of challenges we'll have to start animating. You know, as we start to automate that process of rigging, we can then focus more of our effort into creating believable performances that an audience will enjoy. So with that said, hope you enjoyed the course and take care.